The world stood frozen in disbelief on the 8th day of August 2025, when a scene unfolded in the White House that seemed ripped from the pages of a geopolitical thriller. In a moment that stunned diplomats, political analysts, and millions of onlookers worldwide, the presidents of Azerbaijan and Armenia, two nations locked in a bitter and bloody conflict for decades, sat together across the Oval Office desk with none other than former U.S. President Donald Trump. The gathering was no ordinary summit. It was a historic, breathtaking, and for many, shocking event. The signing of a trilateral peace agreement that promises to rewrite the fate of an entire region. For over 30 years, the South Caucasus had been a powder keg of tension, punctuated by war, deep-rooted animosities, and repeated failures of diplomacy. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, born from ethnic and territorial disputes, claimed tens of thousands of lives and displaced hundreds of thousands, casting a shadow of mistrust and violence over generations. Previous peace attempts, led by various international bodies, had faltered amid mutual accusations and political brinkmanship. Yet on that day, in the iconic heart of American power, history was made. Seemingly out of nowhere, the news rippled instantly across global media outlets, igniting an unprecedented media frenzy. Headlines blared across continents. Unthinkable peace deal sealed at the White House. Trump brokers historic ceasefire. South Caucasus conflict edges toward resolution. Social networks exploded with commentary, while the streets of Baku and Yerevan, as well as Washington, D.C., buzzed with cautious hope and heated debate. Governments, intelligence agencies, and international organizations scrambled to assess the implications of this seismic development. The entire world watched, collectively holding its breath, as old enemies dared to shake hands under the watchful eyes of a controversial U.S. figure, now recast as peacemaker. Politicians hailed the agreement as a grand diplomatic triumph. Supporters of the deal praised Trump's role as a bold broker who shattered diplomatic inertia, while critics questioned the motivations behind the U.S. re-engagement in the Caucasus and the possible long-term consequences. Global leaders from the European Union to the United Nations welcomed the prospect of stability in a historically volatile zone, but also warned that fragile peace could quickly unravel if underlying issues remained unaddressed. Within the halls of power in Moscow and Ankara, the reverberations were particularly profound. Russia, long considered the dominant external influence in the Caucasus, found its traditional leverage challenged by the renewed U.S. presence. Turkey, a key ally of Azerbaijan, cautiously endorsed the agreement, seeing opportunities for regional integration, but wary of American ambitions. Meanwhile, Iran monitored the situation with concern, aware that shifting alliances in its northern neighborhood could upset a delicate balance. Behind the public celebrations and official statements, however, whispers of intrigue and conspiracy began to surface. Analysts and insiders speculated on the secret negotiations that led to the accord. The backdoor dealings and concessions made away from the spotlight. Questions arose about what was traded for peace, who truly benefits, and what this means for the future of U.S. foreign policy and regional power dynamics. Was this an authentic breakthrough for lasting peace, or a carefully orchestrated move in a larger geopolitical chess game? This was not merely a political event. It was a grand spectacle with profound implications. The eyes of the world were fixed on a moment that might well redefine the contours of power in the South Caucasus and beyond. The story had only just begun. The Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, whose embers have smoldered since the waning days of the Soviet Union, represents one of the most intractable and devastating disputes in the post-Cold War world. Rooted in complex ethnic, territorial, and political grievances, it has shaped the destinies of Armenia and Azerbaijan, defined the geopolitical contours of the South Caucasus, and drawn in powerful regional and global actors, each with vested interests and conflicting agendas. The origins of this bitter feud trace back to the early 20th century, when Nagorno-Karabakh, a mountainous enclave predominantly inhabited by ethnic Armenians but geographically within Azerbaijan's borders, became a flashpoint for nationalist aspirations and Soviet-era administrative decisions. With the dissolution of the USSR, suppressed tensions erupted into open warfare, leading to a bloody and protracted conflict in the early 1990s that left tens of thousands dead and hundreds of thousands displaced. A fragile ceasefire was brokered in 1994, but peace remained elusive, with periodic flare-ups and skirmishes turning into full-scale wars, most notably the violent 6-week war in 2020 between Azerbaijani forces and Armenian-backed separatists. Over the decades, international efforts to resolve the conflict have been largely unsuccessful. The Minsk Group, co-chaired by Russia, the United States, and France, repeatedly attempted to mediate a peaceful settlement, but failed to overcome the entrenched positions of the parties. Russia, with its historical ties and military presence in the region, often acted as both mediator and power broker, maintaining a delicate balance while asserting its own strategic interests. Turkey's unwavering support for Azerbaijan further complicated the situation, heightening regional tensions and introducing a broader geopolitical rivalry. Against this backdrop, the announcement of a trilateral agreement brokered under the auspices of the United States has sent shockwaves through the corridors of power worldwide. For many, it signals a decisive shift in the long-standing deadlock, representing not only a potential cessation of hostilities, but also an opportunity for renewed regional cooperation and economic integration. The pact includes unprecedented provisions aimed at creating secure transport corridors, facilitating the return of displaced populations and fostering economic development. A blueprint for peace that goes beyond mere ceasefire lines. Yet the agreement's timing and contours have sparked intense speculation. Observers note that it coincides with shifting global power dynamics, the waning influence of Russia amid economic and political pressures, the reassertion of American geopolitical ambitions, and the complex balancing act of regional players striving to protect their interests in a volatile environment. The United States' re-engagement in the South Caucasus, after years of relative disengagement, is viewed by some as a bold strategic move to reassert influence and counterbalance Russian and Turkish sway. The fragile peace that now hangs in the balance could reshape alliances and realign power structures, with implications extending far beyond the Caucasus. For Armenia and Azerbaijan, it offers a painful but necessary path to coexistence, demanding compromise and reconciliation from deeply divided societies. For the international community, it poses a challenge to sustain momentum, build trust, and address the underlying historical grievances that have fueled decades of conflict. As the dust settles, the question remains: will this unprecedented trilateral accord mark the dawn of lasting peace? Or is it merely a fragile pause before history's wounds are reopened? The world watches with bated breath as a new chapter in the South Caucasus story begins to unfold. The image of Donald Trump as an unlikely peacemaker has sent shockwaves through the corridors of global diplomacy, igniting fierce debates and a whirlwind of speculation about the true nature of his involvement in the South Caucasus peace process. Known for his unpredictable style and controversial tenure as the President of the United States, Trump's reemergence on the diplomatic stage in this high-stakes conflict has forced experts and observers alike to reconsider long-held assumptions about power, strategy, and influence. At first glance, Trump's presence in the White House meeting alongside Azerbaijan's Ilham Aliyev and Armenia's Nikol Pashinyan seems like an astonishing diplomatic coup, a triumph of bold leadership breaking through years of diplomatic stalemate. Yet, beneath the polished surface of televised handshakes and formal signatures lies a complex web of calculated moves, secret back channels, and shadowy negotiations. Insiders reveal that months of intense, behind-the-scenes diplomacy preceded the public ceremony, involving not only official envoys, but also private intermediaries, influential lobbyists, and powerful business figures with vested interests in the region. One theory gaining traction among analysts is that Trump leveraged his unique network of personal and financial connections to craft a deal that simultaneously serves multiple agendas. Sources close to the negotiations hint at substantial economic incentives promised to key players, including investments in energy infrastructure and transport corridors, that could unlock lucrative opportunities for American companies and international partners. The reopening of the Silk Road corridor, facilitating trade between the Caspian Sea and Europe, has become a focal point of these strategic calculations. Meanwhile, critics argue that Trump's move is less about peace and more about recalibrating America's global posture amid shifting geopolitical realities. The agreement could be interpreted as a gambit to challenge Russian dominance in the Caucasus, reassert U.S. influence in a region traditionally seen as Moscow's sphere, and send a clear message to allies and adversaries alike. In this light, the pact transcends mere conflict resolution. It is a chess piece in the larger game of great power rivalry. Adding fuel to the fire are whispers of secret deals struck in the shadows, some suggesting that compromises made at the negotiating table are already stirring dissatisfaction among hardliners within both Azerbaijan and Armenia. The balance of power, territorial concessions, and security guarantees embedded in the agreement are viewed by some as a precarious equilibrium, maintained only by the presence of international guarantees and continued diplomatic pressure. Moreover, questions swirl around the role of other key actors. Turkey's close ties to Azerbaijan and its growing regional ambitions have raised concerns about Ankara's influence over the peace terms and the future security landscape. Russia, traditionally the primary arbiter in Caucasian affairs, appears to have been sidelined or at least compelled to acquiesce to a U.S.-brokered solution, a scenario that could reshape its approach to regional engagement and military presence. The strategic interplay between these powers has created an intricate diplomatic dance, with Trump at its center as an unconventional but undeniably pivotal figure. The unfolding narrative suggests that the peace agreement is as much a product of realpolitik and maneuvering as it is of genuine aspirations for reconciliation. Yet, the full extent of the behind-the-scenes machinations remains shrouded in secrecy, fueling ongoing speculation about the true beneficiaries and the durability of the accord. As the world watches this grand spectacle, the question lingers. Is this a genuine breakthrough for peace, or a carefully orchestrated move in a broader geopolitical gambit? Only time will reveal the answers. But one thing is certain. The reverberations of this moment will echo far beyond the borders of Azerbaijan and Armenia. The peace agreement signed at the White House on that historic August day represents a monumental breakthrough, not only for Azerbaijan and Armenia, but for the entire South Caucasus region. Its carefully crafted provisions promise to end decades of conflict and open the door to a new era of cooperation. Yet beneath its optimistic veneer lie profound complexities and potential pitfalls. Central to the accord is the establishment of secure and internationally supervised transport corridors, connecting Azerbaijan's mainland to its exclave of Nakhchivan, as well as opening new routes for trade and movement that transcend historical divisions. This bold infrastructural vision is poised to transform the region's economic landscape, rekindling ambitions for a modern Silk Road and integrating energy pipelines, railways, and highways that have long been stymied by conflict. Moreover, the agreement addresses the contentious issue of displaced persons and refugees, mandating the gradual and monitored return of those uprooted by war to their ancestral homes, a step heralded by humanitarian organizations as a vital component of reconciliation. This element of the pact offers a glimmer of hope for healing societal wounds, but also raises concerns about the potential for renewed tensions amid fragile coexistence. Another pillar of the treaty is the mutual recognition of territorial integrity, with Armenia agreeing to withdraw its military presence from certain contested areas, while Azerbaijan pledges to guarantee the cultural and religious rights of Armenian communities remaining in the region. This delicate balance attempts to safeguard identities and historical legacies, yet remains a flashpoint for nationalist factions opposed to compromise. Crucially, the accord also signals the phased dissolution of the Minsk Group's long-standing mediation role, a diplomatic earthquake that underscores the shifting balance of power and the emergence of new actors in the peace process. The United States, asserting a more hands-on approach, aims to fill this void with robust guarantees backed by international mechanisms designed to enforce compliance and prevent relapses into violence. Yet the path ahead is riddled with uncertainties. Insiders caution that the fragile ceasefire hinges on complex security arrangements and confidence-building measures that require unwavering political will. An elusive commodity in a region scarred by historical trauma and mutual suspicion. The specter of spoilers looms large, with hardline nationalist groups on both sides threatening to derail progress through provocation or outright sabotage. Economic challenges also threaten to undermine the Accord's lofty aspirations. Years of conflict have devastated local economies and infrastructure, and rebuilding will demand enormous investment and sustained cooperation. Conditions vulnerable to political shifts and external interference. The success of the agreement depends on translating diplomatic promises into tangible improvements in the lives of ordinary citizens. A daunting but indispensable task. International experts warn of the potential for a peace paradox, where formal agreements exist on paper, but societal reconciliation lags, leaving underlying grievances festering. The fragile coexistence envisioned by the treaty requires not only political accords, but profound social healing, cultural dialogue, and mutual understanding, processes that can take generations to mature. Despite these daunting challenges, the agreement stands as a beacon of hope amid a long night of hostility. It offers a framework for stability and prosperity that, if nurtured carefully, could redefine the South Caucasus as a crossroads of peace rather than conflict. However, the vigilance of the international community and the resolve of local leaders will be critical in transforming this historic moment from a fleeting diplomatic triumph into a lasting legacy. The reverberations of the trilateral peace agreement reached far beyond the borders of Azerbaijan and Armenia, eliciting a chorus of reactions from global leaders, diplomatic corps, and policy analysts that highlighted the profound geopolitical ramifications of this landmark accord. As the world's eyes remained riveted on the unfolding developments, the delicate balance of power in the South Caucasus emerged as a focal point for renewed international competition and strategic recalibration. In the capitals of Europe, the agreement was greeted with cautious optimism. The European Union, long advocating for stability in the region due to its strategic position as a gateway between Asia and Europe, welcomed the pact as a promising step toward lasting peace. European diplomats emphasized the importance of inclusive economic cooperation and human rights guarantees embedded in the treaty, while also underscoring the need for continued vigilance to prevent renewed hostilities. France, co-chair of the Minsk Group, issued statements endorsing the agreement, yet warned that the path to reconciliation would be fraught with challenges requiring sustained diplomatic engagement. Across the Atlantic, Washington's reaction was a mixture of strategic satisfaction and careful calculation. The Biden administration, though not directly involved in brokering the deal, publicly praised the efforts while signaling a renewed American commitment to stability in the Caucasus. Analysts viewed the agreement as a deft maneuver that bolstered U.S. influence in a region historically dominated by Russia, reinforcing Washington's intent to counterbalance Moscow's strategic interests and project power in a critical geopolitical crossroads. Moscow's response was nuanced and measured, reflecting the Kremlin's dual role as a traditional power broker and a wary observer of encroaching Western influence. While officially welcoming the peace initiative, Russian officials expressed reservations about the diminished role of the Minsk Group and the increasing American presence. The Kremlin swiftly moved to reaffirm its military and diplomatic ties with both Armenia and Azerbaijan, signaling its intent to maintain leverage amid the shifting landscape. Intelligence reports suggest heightened Russian efforts to safeguard its bases and supply routes in the region, wary of any erosion of its long-standing dominance. Turkey's reaction was notably enthusiastic, aligning with Ankara's long-standing support for Azerbaijan's territorial claims and regional ambitions. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan lauded the agreement as a triumph of diplomacy and foresaw it as a catalyst for enhanced Turkish influence in the Caucasus. Turkish officials also stressed the importance of new transport corridors and energy projects that could solidify Ankara's role as a pivotal regional power. though some observers cautioned about the potential for Turkey's ambitions to provoke tensions with both Russia and Iran. Iran's posture was marked by cautious concern. Sharing borders with both Armenia and Azerbaijan, Tehran monitored the developments with keen interest, wary that shifting alliances and enhanced U.S. presence could unsettle its own regional calculations. Iranian analysts voiced apprehension about the potential for increased Turkish and American influence to disrupt the balance of power in the Caucasus and threaten Iran's security interests. Beyond these regional powers, international organizations, including the United Nations and various human rights groups, underscored the critical importance of implementing the agreement's provisions on displaced persons, cultural preservation, and human rights protections. Many stress that the success of the accord hinges on translating political commitments into meaningful on-the-ground changes that foster trust and reconciliation between communities scarred by decades of conflict. The broader geopolitical consequences of the agreement extend to the evolving dynamics of great power competition. By brokering this deal, the United States signaled its strategic intent to reclaim a foothold in a region where Russian influence has long been predominant, complicating Moscow's traditional dominance and introducing new vectors of competition. At the same time, the shifting balance could reverberate across other contested spaces where spheres of influence intersect, from Eastern Europe to the Middle East. As this grand diplomatic endeavor unfolds, the world stands at a crossroads. The trilateral agreement offers a fragile but promising blueprint for peace, yet the regional and global stakes ensure that the path forward will be anything but straightforward. The fate of the South Caucasus and the broader contours of international relations hang in a precarious balance, shaped by the decisions of leaders, the aspirations of peoples, and the relentless currents of geopolitical ambition. As the ink dries on this historic accord, the peace that so many have long yearned for remains tenuous, suspended over a region fraught with unresolved grievances and simmering mistrust. Behind the formal declarations and diplomatic fanfare, there lurks an undercurrent of uncertainty, a sense that the fragile calm may conceal a storm waiting to erupt anew. Analysts, insiders, and observers alike warn that this peace, while monumental in its symbolism, is but the opening act in a drama whose final chapters are yet unwritten. One speculative scenario envisions the gradual normalization of relations, with the successful implementation of transport corridors and the return of displaced persons serving as tangible proof of progress. In this optimistic vision, economic integration blossoms, cultural exchanges flourish, and the scars of conflict begin to heal, allowing the South Caucasus to emerge as a vibrant hub connecting East and West. Such an outcome would mark a triumph of diplomacy over division, a testament to the resilience of human hope and political will. Yet, darker possibilities loom. The entrenched nationalist sentiments that have fueled decades of hostility do not dissipate overnight. Hardline factions on both sides may exploit any perceived breaches of the agreement to reignite tensions, risking a relapse into violence that could engulf the region once more. The complexity of enforcing security guarantees in contested zones raises concerns about the capacity of international monitors to prevent provocations and maintain peace in volatile flashpoints. The geopolitical chessboard adds further complexity. Russia's wary acceptance of the U.S. brokered deal may harden into strategic rivalry, with Moscow seeking to undermine the accord through covert influence and proxy maneuvers. Turkey's assertive role could provoke regional power struggles, potentially drawing Iran and other neighbors into a tangled web of competing interests. The international community's commitment to sustained engagement will be tested as these great powers jockey for position. The personal ambitions and legacies of the leaders involved, Aliyev, Pashinyan, and Trump, also weigh heavily on the unfolding narrative. Each faces domestic pressures, political opposition, and historical burdens that shape their capacity to deliver on promises made in the dazzling spotlight of the White House. The durability of their commitments will be scrutinized by both their peoples and the global audience, whose hopes hang precariously in the balance. Beyond geopolitics and leadership, the human dimension remains paramount. The lived experiences of ordinary Armenians and Azerbaijanis, families torn apart, communities displaced, generations shaped by conflict, define the true stakes of this fragile peace. Their voices, often lost amid grand strategic calculations, will ultimately determine whether reconciliation takes root or fractures deepen. As the world holds its breath, this moment stands as both a beacon of hope and a crucible of tension. The path forged in the White House may yet herald a new dawn or falter amid the shadows of history. In this uncertain twilight, one truth endures. Peace is never merely the absence of war, but the presence of justice, trust, and a shared vision for the future. The story of this accord is far from complete. Its pages will be written in the days, months, and years to come, by diplomats and citizens, by powers great and small, and by the relentless currents of fate that shape the destiny of nations. For now, the world watches, waiting for the next chapter to unfold.